Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Seattle Angel Conference program. We're running a bunch of workshops before the Seattle Angel Conference 28, trying to get new angel investors and stronger companies together. One of the things that we do is we engage in trying to help startups be prepared. So we're doing some work on pitching, and we will do some future workshops. So pay attention to the meetup groups that got you here. So Dana is active in our community in Seattle. So Dana, why don't you take it away?
Great, thank you, John. I'm going to share my screen and then I'll take it down in a little bit. But I am delighted to be here. Was really thinking we would go around the room and introduce ourselves. So I was like, okay, where's everybody at? So if you haven't yet, please put in the chat where you're calling in from. This is one of the amazing things about Zoom, that we have people from all over the world on these calls. I'm calling in from the Seattle area, and it's a beautiful, sunny summer day. It's a myth that it rains all the time. And I love this topic, why technical founders struggle with investor pitches and how to nail yours. Because as a tech investor, I've seen hundreds of pitches from technical founders, maybe even more than 1,000. And I've noticed a pattern. Even brilliant minds struggle to communicate their idea in a way that engages investors. So let's fix that today. I encourage you to take notes. This is your time for learning. And at the end, we're going to have time to do some brainstorming and practicing together. And there's also plenty of time for Q&A. So save your questions till the end because we'll have a big chunk of time for that. Now, the reason that I'm doing this is that I've noticed some things. So I'm Dana Sather Robinson, your friendly neighborhood angel investor. I'm also a pitch trainer and a public speaking trainer. So therefore, when I'm listening to pitches, I've got a couple different points of view. As an angel investor and as a trainer of presentation skills. So as an investor, I'm a clean tech investor through E8 Angels, and I go to a lot of other events, and I work with a lot of clients who are mostly tech founders in AI or type of software or clean tech. So I've observed what works and what doesn't in a pitch, and I've learned what investors want. And then as a trainer with 2 decades of experience in training presentation skills and public speaking, globally, I lived in Asia and Europe and the US. So I have developed this toolkit and these methods that can help people improve how they communicate. Today, we're going to cover these things. I'm going to talk about the most common mistakes that I see from tech founders in a pitch. And I'm going to give you the investor perspective of what they're thinking when they're listening to a pitch and what they're looking for. And then some steps on how you can focus your pitch on what investors really want. I'm going to take that down so we can see each other. Here's my observation as a tech investor and meeting lots of brilliant founders is that being really brilliant at something, having created this amazing product and knowing it better than anybody else in the world does not mean that you can explain it effectively to others, especially investors. And here's what I've seen are the most common mistakes that technical founders make in a pitch. I want you to be aware of them so you know what to watch out for in your pitch. Ready? I hope you're taking notes. The most common mistake that I see from technical founders in a pitch is they talk too much about the product. Second one is they use jargon specific to their industry. And third is too much information. I call it TMI, cramming a lot of information into a short pitch. Here's why those mistakes are a big problem in your pitch. Okay, so talking too much about the problem is common because founders are often talking, they're focused on what they're building, how it works, and its features. And I totally get that because it's human nature. We love to talk about what we're working on. We want to share what we're excited about. However, investors don't invest in products. They invest in businesses. So while you're explaining how your product works, investors are thinking, who would buy this product? Wonder how big this market is. Do they have any traction? So it's important to resist that temptation to dive straight into what we love to talk about, the product details. And instead, it needs to be more about the business, the opportunity. The second big mistake that I see happen all the time is founders often slip into using jargon that's specific to their industry. And I totally get this because you're surrounded by people that speak that language. Perhaps at university, this is what how everybody talked. You had to give presentations, they were technical. And when you're working with your team, it's all about the tech. And it would be easy to assume that investors that invest in your industry would know the technology. But in reality, a lot of founders don't have that deep technical expertise in the field. Many investors come from a business background, or they invest across various industries. And sometimes they are focused on an industry, but they don't even have that technology experience. For example, a lot of clean tech investors will invest in clean tech because they want to solve a huge problem, but they don't understand the technology. And there's so many facets of that industry that even if you are knowledgeable in one, you're not going to know everything about the others. Another example is there's a lot of investors right now that are all in on AI. And they know the market. They see the market opportunity, but they don't know the ins and outs of the technology. So don't assume that investors understand your technology and your language and your industry acronyms. In fact, assume that they don't understand. So simplify your language, avoid all jargon, all acronyms. Use language as if you were meeting me for coffee and think, okay, if I were meeting for coffee, I'm Dana for coffee, and she doesn't understand my technology, but she might be interested in this market opportunity. How would I explain what I do? That's the language to use, okay? Don't assume we know it. And the other mistake that I see happen all the time across most founders make this mistake, whether they're tech founders or not, is too much information. It's very tempting for founders to fill pitches with lots of details. And that's understandable because we think, well, let's include everything that investors might want to know. And then it'll help them make a decision on if they're interested or not, or it'll help convince them that they should invest. But the reality is that overloading a pitch with information is confusing. It's overwhelming. When there's a lot of information and it's coming at us fast, for investors, it's hard for us to take it all in. It goes by in a blur. And then they're not able to remember those key points because it's buried in all of this information. And the good news is investors don't need to learn all the details about your business and your product in your pitch. Nobody invests after the first pitch. Decisions are made after due diligence. So a good pitch leaves room for curiosity. You actually want to leave things out so that investors ask questions. Q&A part in a pitch is really, really important. This is where you're having this conversation with investors. So save things for Q&A and leave things out, particularly tech details, for follow-up meetings. You actually want to leave things out so that you can get to that second meeting. So think of it as that first pitch makes them curious enough to want to learn more. It doesn't need everything. I realize that this pitch process, these pitches to investors, it's not an intuitive process. It takes learning to know what investors want. So that's why I do these seminars and workshops often, so that you'll have some clarity over what should be in your pitch. Okay, you want your pitch to be very clear so that the investor can explain your business to another investor days later, which is why you really want them to understand it quickly and not be overloaded with information. Which is why you want to leave it to the basics, particularly at the beginning. Let them know what your business does, what industry you're in, and tell them why it's compelling, why they should be interested. And to do that, you need to keep the whole thing very simple. Investors really want to understand the deal, right? Understand your business without needing to read or listen to lots and lots of information. So we want to make it easy for them. Here's a process so that you can avoid those mistakes and have this pitch that's clear and concise, and investors will be engaged. This is kind of an overview of the process that I use with my clients, and we'll dig into some of it. So we'll spend some time creating and brainstorming as well. The first step, and I think this is the most important, is to have the right mindset. I call this mindset investor focused, where you shift your focus from what you are used to talking about to what investors want to hear. Here's why. Your pitch is not about you. It's about your investors. This might seem counterintuitive, but the investor pitch is for investors to decide if you're a fit. If they want to decide if they're interested, and if they're not interested, how can they help you? So if you're in this mindset of investor focused, it's easier for you to know what to say. Think of your pitch as a gift, not in an arrogant way, but as if you were, if, let's say, if loved one has a special birthday coming up and you want to get them a gift, you're not going to find a gift that you like. You're going to think of something that they like. You're going to think about what's important to them. And then you'll package that gift in a way that they receive it so that you can give it to them. So this is the same with your pitch. Don't talk about what you want to talk about. Talk about what's important to them. And then you package that pitch and deliver it in a way that they understand it and really get it. That's the mindset of investor focused. It means the content and the delivery is tailored to the needs of the investor. So let's make it easy for them. Okay? Investors, like we're people too. We get confused, we get overwhelmed with information. We're usually very nice and we'll help you if we can, even if you're not a fit for us. But think about how much information there is in the world, right? We're all overwhelmed with information. So when investors look at a pitch and listen to a pitch, they don't want it overwhelming. They want it easy to follow. So here's how to make it easy to follow, is to craft a pitch that's laser focused on what investors care about. Here are the 6 things that investors care about before they care about your product features. Problem. They want to see that you're solving a real and urgent problem that people will pay to fix. Solution. That you have a unique solution that clearly addresses the problem that you're solving. Market opportunity. Don't just give the investors this total addressable market number. Give them a story that shows that there is really a market opportunity here now. Highlight trends that you've noticed in your industry that show why the timing is right to invest now. That makes market opportunity relevant. Business model. Demonstrate how you have a profitable and scalable business model. A friend of mine who's an investor and does a lot of screening calls for an angel group. So she sees all the pitches before they even get to her angel group. She said to me one time, Dana, I see so many great product ideas with no business model. So make sure you tell us how you're going to make money. Team. Investors want to know why you and your team are the right team to grow this business. Because that's the #1 criteria in making an investment decision. They back founders they believe in. Why you? And traction. Investors want to see that you have customer validation. Even if you don't have sales yet, tell us why you know that customers are interested. Do you have wait lists? Do you have letters of intent? Do you have pilots signed up? Have you done 50 or more client interviews? How can you prove that customers are interested? We want to know. Okay, so those are the things that we need to make sure are really clear to investors. How do we do this? Here's the process. And it's fun. Here we go. #1, brainstorm. #2, plan. #3, outline. Do all of these things before you start on your deck. Here's why. If you do your brainstorming and planning of what you're going to say and create this really clear narrative, this is your story that you're going to tell investors. If you get that down ahead of time, you'll save so much time in doing your deck because you'll say you won't have to do 100 edits. And you'll make sure that your pitch resonates with investors the first time. What not to do when you think, oh my gosh, I need a pitch. Do not download a pitch template from the internet and start filling it in. Because as we're crafting slides, it's hard to get in that flow. I don't know about you, but when I open up PowerPoint, I start adjusting, moving the text box and changing the font, and then I fix the background, and then what was I going to say? So do all that brainstorming and planning before you open your slides so that you've done all of that first. And then you just have to fill in the slides with what the message is. So begin by brainstorming ideas for those key messages in your pitch. I think we should do some brainstorming together. All right. You don't have to answer just now. Just write these down. And then at the end, I want to hear your brainstorming. Let's brainstorm problem and solution. Because these are the areas that I think are the most problematic in a pitch. And if you can't nail them at the beginning of your pitch and show investors that you are solving a real problem and they can understand what that problem is, they will stop listening. Most problem statements that I see in a first draft are too vague or too general or too complicated for investors to understand what that problem is. Here's the common mistakes. The one is that they include the overarching issue. Like it's something that might be motivating for you, but it's not the problem you solve. For example, I see a lot of pitches that say the problem is climate change. But then when they talk about their solution doesn't solve climate change. It solves something that is made worse by climate change. So saying that problem is too broad and it's not what you solve, and then it leaves investors just feeling like the whole thing's kind of vague and they're not excited and understanding of what the problem is. Other mistakes are that some founders say the problem as part of the solution. For example, if somebody says enterprises are looking for things that do this, or our industry needs X, that's not a problem. That's your solution phrased a different way. That doesn't sound urgent to investors. So, or I've seen problem statements where it's so complicated. There's this problem and there's this problem and there's this problem and they're interconnected. Okay, you might be solving lots of problems, but if investors don't understand what it is, then it wasn't worth saying. So focus on the real business, the real problem that your business solves. So get out some pen and paper. I'm going to ask you some questions so that you can really think deeply about the problem you solve. I want you to think of your customer first. Who is it that's going to pay to solve the problem you solve? So with your customer in mind, what pain point do they experience before they buy your solution? Jot down a couple words. And why do they pay to solve this problem? with those pain points and motivations in mind, write down a problem statement in just a couple sentences, 1 or 2 sentences. Keep it really, really short. Next, we're going to talk about the solution. And the solution should match the problem you've identified. In that you've got this problem, the solution is the outcome after you've fixed the problem. So focus on the outcome for your customer, not the technical workings of your solution. So let me ask you some questions about this so that you can kind of dig into what you need. Thinking of that customer again, that's now paid for your solution. What does the customer, which is your customer, achieve after using your solution? What's their outcome? And how does your solution directly solve their problem? I'll give you 2 examples so that you get an idea of what I'm after. So I saw a pitch where the founder said the problem is climate change. We had a nice chat afterwards. I gave him a little feedback. And the next time I saw his pitch, he'd totally changed it to a story that was clear. He went from the problem is climate change to this. Meet Maria. She's a blueberry farmer in Eastern Washington. Her problem is that she loses 25% of her crop from farm to customer, which is a huge loss of revenue. Our solution reduces crop wastage by 50%, increasing her revenue. Okay, that's now clear. We've gone from a vague problem to a very specific pain point, and the solution is the outcome, not the tech, but the outcome. So I'll give you one that's more of a tech example. This is kind of a version of one that my client and I created. Jen owns a small to medium-sized business that sells on multiple e-commerce websites. Think Amazon, Spotify, Walmart. She struggles to keep up to date with her inventory across all these platforms, leading to canceled orders and poor reviews. Our solution is an automated software that updates sales and inventory across all e-commerce platforms, leading to 0 cancellations and higher sales. Okay, so you see what used to be very, very complicated about this problem around e-commerce is now client-focused. Canceled orders, poor reviews, reduced sales. Solution solves this problem, higher sales. So you want to keep your problem and solution statements super clear, simple and clear. Simple enough for anyone, even if they're not in your industry, to understand easily. And you notice how those problem and solution statements matched. So, one problem is loss of revenue. The next one is increased sales. Another, you might have a problem around something is very inefficient and time consuming, and your solution saves time and creates efficiencies and automations. So most of the time, if you're selling to B2B customers, problems involve money or time or productivity. And your solution is around saving or making more money, saving time, increasing productivity, that kind of thing. I know that this sounds ridiculously simple. In fact, you're probably saying, but Dana, everybody says that, and I want to stand out. I don't want to be like everybody. But the thing is, investors need to be able to quickly understand your problem and quickly see how your solution addresses that problem. And then you can go into explaining why this is a big market and how you're different than everybody else. So the next one would be that's kind of needs to fit in with this problem solution is market opportunity. Let's brainstorm on market opportunity just for a minute or two. Market opportunity in a pitch is usually a missed opportunity because the numbers are very random. Here's our TAM, here's our SOM that we think is 2% of the TAM, whatever. It just sounds very random, like a wild guess. I want to understand why this is an opportunity now. So besides coming up with very credible numbers, not percentages, not guesses, I want you to also tell us what's going on in the market that makes this the right time. You're the expert in this industry. What have you seen that's happening in your industry that's becoming a trend? Or maybe there's a shift, or there's some changes happening that aren't obvious yet. I'll give you an example of a trend that I've seen in Airbnb in their pitch. They talk about a trend that they saw of Craigslist ads for rooms to rent to travelers in cities. So they saw this trend that people are willing to rent their rooms to travelers, and travelers are willing to rent a room and stay with strangers because they want a different experience. They want to stay with people, not at a hotel, or they want to save money. That trend is what made them decide to start Airbnb. So the market opportunity section of your pitch is not just about numbers. It's about shifts in the industry and showing that you are the expert. This gives you, if you can show what's going on in the industry, that gives you a lot of credibility and shows your expertise. So think about what you've seen that you can include in your pitch. It might only be one sentence. And here's where they kind of come together. As you're planning your pitch, I actually like it in a storyboard format. So you can do it on a whiteboard or post-it notes across the wall or an outline if you prefer more linear. But if the problem is e-commerce, small, medium-sized business owners are struggling to manage inventory on multiple platforms, and the solution is automations that give industry and sales updates on all these platforms, which lead to more sales. And the trend is that more and more companies are selling on multiple platforms. Okay, that's a trend. This is market opportunity here. See, so they link them so that the story makes sense to investors. And this makes it more memorable. And if they remember you days later when they're talking to their investor friends, you are more likely to get invited back for a follow-up meeting. So after you've done that brainstorming, where you can get every section, these key sections of your pitch down to a short message that you can explain clearly, then plan out your pitch and create your whole narrative. Create an outline of your narrative that flows like a story, and practice that out loud. You'll be able to then make sure that your narrative is investor focused and really clear. As you're creating and planning your narrative, be concise, right? If you only have 5 minutes to explain your pitch, you need to be able to get through at least those kind of 6 main sections really clearly and concisely. Avoid overwhelming the pitch with unnecessary details. Investors don't need to understand how your tech works in order to be interested in your business. So keep that part really simple, as if maybe you have a niece or nephew in 8th or 9th grade science class, and they're like, Uncle or Auntie, what is it that you do again? How would you explain it to them? Start with that. I know you're thinking, oh, but investors are so smart, they're going to understand this. But you know what? Investors get so overwhelmed with information. Make it easy, please. Because the goal of your pitch is to create interest and curiosity and communicate really clearly what the business opportunity is. And the goal is to leave them wanting more so that they invite you back, which means you can be concise and leave a lot of things out, or at least the details out, for those follow-up discussions. So to recap the steps, you're going to brainstorm to thinking of what your ideal investor will want to know. Brainstorm on the key sections of your pitch, and then plan it. Plan it out so that the whole pitch is nice and concise. You can tell your story. It's easy to understand. And then practice that narrative, record it, make sure it makes sense. And last, after you've got your narrative, create your slides. The narrative of your pitch is your base. If you get that right, the rest is a lot easier. The narrative is your base for a great deck. It's your base if you're going to create a video. It's your base for a 3-minute pitch, a 5-minute pitch, a 10-minute pitch, and a half-hour meeting. If you have that clear first, then you can adjust your notes and deck to the time that you have or your audience. When you're then creating your deck, make sure it supports your narrative. Okay? It doesn't replace it. It is the support, and it matches your narrative. And planning what you're going to put in your deck up front means that you'll save so much time editing later. And then the final presentation all makes sense. It flows clearly and it makes sense to investors. And it actually then makes it easier for you when you're giving your pitch. If you have a really clear narrative that you've practiced and you have simple slides that support your narrative, when you're meeting investors, then you can focus on your listeners. You can focus on building relationships. A simpler, clearer narrative will make it easy for you to sound conversational, because investors want to get to know you. So you want to go in there to build relationships and have this conversation with them. Investors want to have that confidence that you're capable and committed. So you really want to let them get to know you. And that pitch narrative that's clear and concise and very focused on what investors want will support you in where you can pitch with clarity and enthusiasm and show your personality and show why you're committed. And that will mean that you'll be more likely to be remembered. They're more likely to like you, so you're building relationships with the right investors. This takes practice. It might sound counterintuitive, but you actually have to practice a lot so that you can communicate conversationally and naturally, and sound enthusiastic and authentic. I'm going to show you my favorite way of practicing. Let me just share my screen. It's an app that was developed here in Seattle. I use it with all of my clients. Called Udly. You can record, so I recommend you join Udly. This is the website. When you practice your pitch on Udly, practice without slides, just do the narrative. And then you can play back the video. So you can listen to it, you can watch the video, you can see the transcript, and it will give you AI feedback to say where you could have been more concise, where something could be more clear, what was missing. And it will even give you feedback on your delivery. Like if you talk too fast, which happens a lot when people give pitches, or if you talk too slowly, which some people do, you want to be in that conversational range so that you're easy to listen to. So it really gives great feedback. It can be, your pitch coach on your computer. And I'm going to, because this is really a great group, and these are meetup groups that I love to do events for. I'm going to make you an offer. Udly is shareable, so you can create a video on Udly, and then after you've done several goes and found one that you like, you can click share and put in my email address, and I'll give you time-stamped feedback within Udly on your pitch. I don't offer that to everybody, but anyway, and keep it less than 5 minutes because I do put some thought into it, so it needs to be a short pitch. And here's how we can, I also have a handout for you. This handout is called How to Be More Investor Focused. I find it's just these little reminders that include some of what we covered today and a few others. So use this QR code, put in your email address, and then you'll receive an email so that you can download the handout. This will also put you on my mailing list. I send like 2 to 4 emails a month, not a lot, on pitching insights, communication skills, trends, and events. And I do events like this almost every month. So you can join more. You can always unsubscribe if you want. And let's connect on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and there's my email address. We can, let me know if you want help with your pitch. I do live training events, I do workshops like this, and I do one-on-one training, whichever one that you need. But email me if you have questions. I'm going to go back to that in case you missed it. I would like to now practice your problem and solution statements because it's so important to get them right. That your problem is clear of what you solve, and investors will understand it in a way that, and I have these conversations with other investors. I'll say, oh, I've met a really cool investor. I like what they're doing. And they go, oh, what problem are they solving? Like we actually say that. And if I can't remember it, then they're not going to be interested in learning more. So it's important to get this right. Would anybody like to raise their hand and go first? And there's no judgment here. I realize that if this is like a first draft, the first draft is not going to be great, and that's okay. We don't expect it to be. We just want you to have a chance to practice and get feedback. That's what this is for.
You lower your screen and we'll see people's faces. Just hit the raise hand button and then we can give people a try and give a little bit of feedback. Yeah. Uh, Nocta. That's not quite hit the button, but go ahead.
Hello, Natia. Where are
So,
you calling in from?
yeah, I'm living now in Barcelona. I'm from Iran. So my friend and I, we are trying to make an e-commerce startup. The problem that we try to solve is that to simplify the actually because it's too complicated to follow up the online shopping when you shop with different websites, to follow up them, to follow up your payments, and to follow up your returning your items. So, and to choosing between so many items. So we want to solve it with simplify your shopping process. So
Okay.
yeah, so can I continue?
Yeah, so who's your customer that's going to buy this from you?
Everybody who are preferred to online shop, especially women.
So the customer is the consumers, not the platform.
Actually, it has two parts. B2B, because it's a commerce platform, B2B and B2C, but uh, we have some features for the companies and some features from the clients, but the most important part it's from the clients because we are trying to simplify the shopping process
Clients as in their customers or as in
as a customers, B2C.
the thing is, okay, it's which is going to be your first customer? Would it be the business, the platform?
The business actually.
Let's talk about let's talk about that problem first, because
Okay.
it's a lot easier to target businesses than consumers, at least initially.
Yeah.
So, what problem do you solve for the e-commerce site?
From the businesses, actually.
Yes.
So we help them to follow up uh, the customers, what products that are most popular and most preferred by the clients, and have data about the preference of the clients.
Okay. So the problem you solve is that they're leaving money on the table because their user experience isn't clear, isn't helping customers find what they want.
Yeah, exactly. Because the final customers, the normal people who are online shopping, so we have many windows of different products of different companies. We have data of their preference, so the companies can have more data about the final client's preference. So help them to uh, clarify and to be more focused about spending money on the products are more preferred.
So maybe maybe something is this the problem that these platforms have or these websites that are selling, they're not engaging their customers enough to finish off the sale. Whereas your solution has the data to interact with the customers with what they want. Is that close? John, did I?
I've been answering a question in the
Okay,
chat. I
that's
wasn't
okay.
really paying attention.
So no,
I
so
think I
something
think
like
the
that.
fundamental difficulty with the framing is we don't know the submarket that it will be activated clearly enough. And so you need to be able to get down to what the specific group of people that would move is, right? So what makes this customer the right customer in the next 6 months, right? That will help me express something a little bit tighter.
Yeah, so if your initial customers are people selling online,
Yes, but that's like hundreds of thousands of them. So then
yes.
what?
So
The first ones will be the local companies. For example, I live in Barcelona, so Catalonia these days have many manufacturing, especially in clothes and fashion industries. The first one will be the local companies in Catalonia.
Why?
Actually, because they have little market
Be-
and they need to be
Because
more like
they're nearby.
they nearby and they
So it's
they
very
they're
clear that
they're so
many small
little.
businesses don't have clarity on how to sell, right? And so there's a whole question there about how many resources they have to sell, and that they should have online sales to manage the fact that they are not selling in person as well as they need to as well, right? And so there's a whole process there. So the problem that you're solving is they do not have enough revenue and they need to increase their revenue by finding new markets. And we make it easier for them to find new markets by connecting them to people who care about their product. That would be a business oriented process. That means you have to have on your solution some mechanism of filtering for local fashion consumers, which that would be its own kind of narrative. So there's a very, now you're doing a two-sided marketplace, which is 3 times as hard as doing a single-sided marketplace. So you're making it more complex than you might want at the beginning, where you might want to do like, here, let me help you figure out how to sell at all, right, to the business, right? And that business offer might be much easier to start with, right? And then evolve. Is that helpful, Dana?
yeah, I think that that's getting close. If you really hone in on if these are your initial customers and why, as in what problem do they have that make them receptive to be your beachhead market? And if it's because they don't have that, they have a very simple website, they're not sophisticated enough to really attract the right customers, and you can make it simpler because you have the data and the expertise for them to attract the right customers online, then that shows that you understand your customer's problem.
I see a bunch of hands up.
Yep,
I
let's move on. Thank you, Natia.
don't see
Thank you.
There's
It was
Larry.
very helpful. Thank you. It was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Good luck.
So Larry, you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you very much. Hi, my name's Larry Pierce, and currently the hottest trend in cancer therapies is called radiopharmaceutical therapies. It's got like 130 clinical trials, 34 of them are in phase 3, something like $3 billion worth of acquisitions last year. But they have a huge problem in tracking the patient radiation. Your Apple Watches or Samsung smartwatches, they don't track radiation. So the doctors have, and the pharmaceutical companies have a big problem tracking the radiation. So my company's developed a portable, wearable radiation tracking device specifically for radiopharmaceutical therapy patients. And it helps the doctors to get better outcomes, and it saves a lot of money for the pharmaceutical companies who are developing these new therapies as well.
Okay, so the very specific problem you solve is during these clinical trials that in this trial, the companies conducting it, the researchers, cannot track radiation levels.
And for the clinical patients, actually getting treatment as well for both those scenarios. Yeah.
Okay, why is it important to track radiation levels?
If we inject somebody with radiation, particularly kidneys, liver, spleen, are all in danger of getting radiation damage. If you give a patient too much radiation, you can burn out their kidneys. If you don't give them enough radiation, you're not destroying the tumors. So there is a sweet spot in there, and we have to do monitoring for that.
Okay, and this is only during clinical trials, or this is also for treatment?
Clinical trials and for treatment.
Okay.
And
So in
who is
clinical,
paying?
In the clinical trial scenario, the pharmaceutical company pays. We actually, our device reduces the cost per patient. They're mandated for their clinical trial. They have to do this. It saves them significant amount of money per patient. And plus, because we're using a unified device across sites, they don't have to do cross calibration between clinical sites. So they actually get to use fewer patients in their trial as well.
How big is that market you just described?
The TAM is $2.4 billion currently, and
On the clinical tests for pharmaceuticals.
inclusive of both.
No. What is the pharmaceutical TAM?
Oh, the pharmaceutical TAM. At 34 clinical trials right now at about $50,000 per patient, we're looking about, maybe anywhere between 10 to $50 million. I've spoken with.
They're going to pay you $50,000 for each wristwatch?
No. They're going to pay me. Oh, sorry.
See, this is one of the typical failures of pitches. Is you tell me that TAM, sports are so big, so I sell this little pin that makes this little sport work. It's not this TAM, it's this little thing focused on what you sell. So you're going to sell how many of these to every possible clinical trial? How big is that number?
So let me see. Let's say about 1,000 patients per trial, with about 130 trials. So we're at 130,000 times, let's say $10,000 per device. Then that's we're 13 million, I think.
Yeah. So that's a TAM, but that's a good number for getting from I have nothing to I have stability on my little tiny thing, right? So that's what I would use as a go-to-market story.
When you asked me the question and I didn't have an immediate response, I knew I was in trouble.
But and the way the investors would talk about that is you don't know your numbers.
Yeah.
And that's a quick dismissal of you, then they stop paying attention, right? So there's a whole bunch of triggers that the angels are looking for that gets them to know. And then they'll be polite and they'll say happy things. They might ask a question or two, but then they've already gotten to know in their head, right? And knowing your numbers is one of those. So in your go-to-market, you might say in your story, we're going to go after the clinical trial market first. We have these 5 strategic pharmacy things in our base already, and it'll get us to stable. And then we'll use that to get to clinical trials, which will get us to this other
Nice job. That's exactly where we're going with it. I like that. Thank you.
But you have to tell that story.
Yeah, I have to tell.
And you have to tell the story about why it's vital, because we have death by doctor all the time where they don't do exactly what they needed to do and you fall off the cliff either too little or too much, and it doesn't do what you need and the patient suffers, right? So this is mandatory so that people don't die, and we have this stepping stone, and the stepping stone leads to this bigger thing. However, I'm worried the way you say it, that the bigger thing, the treatment thing is not big enough for you.
That one is, so the treatment one is currently at $2.4 billion TAM.
Paying you $10,000 a pop.
Correct. And then that's a TAM between the US and the EU. And then it was, each time a new pharmaceutical is cleared by the FDA. Our device works for that as well. So when prostate cancer got cleared, we jumped up like billions of dollars. Our TAM went up billions of dollars overnight. And we got 34 of them in phase 3 trials right now, with another 100 that are in earlier phase 1 and phase 2 trials.
So there's a
So,
long conversation there, but I think we want to pull it back to
yeah.
the pitching.
So as you can see, like everybody noticed, these are connected. You've got this problem you're solving, the solution, but what's the market that you're solving the problem for? So these are the things that it's I see so many founders just like, oh, the market opportunity was too hard to calculate. I just kind of gloss over it. But these are all so important that you have a clear problem, a solution that solves that, and it's easily to connect. We can connect that they work together, and that this is the market that you're solving it for. So they're all connected and all super important to have clear and concise. So Larry, on yours, because you're starting with a specific customer, which is part of, your go-to market, which is, the next thing, that's you talk about their problem first. They have this problem. They have to monitor radiation. They can't do it. People will die if they don't get it right. Our solution does this, cost effective, saves money, nobody gets sued. Right. And then and this is who the market is, where we're starting, and how big it's growing to. All of these can connect really seamlessly, but it takes some brainstorming and planning. So
Yes.
thank you, Larry. Good
Thank
luck.
you.
Who's next, John?
Looks like it's Brian.
Hi, Brian. Where are you calling in from?
Hi, I'm calling in from Bend, Oregon.
Oh, nice.
Home of the Ben Venture Conference.
That's correct. Well, hopefully we'll be there in October.
Well, hopefully you'll be in Seattle Angel Conference in September. So we'll see.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, go ahead,
I hope
Brian.
so. Okay, Brian, what problem are you solving for who?
Awesome. So Green Thumb AI solves the problem that small to mid-sized farmers cannot afford current digital agronomic solutions that have been shown to increase yields by 20-30%.
Okay, so they can't afford these solutions, but that's kind of their situation. What's their pain point?
Right now, they rely on guesswork to manage most of their operations or pen and paper.
Okay. Okay. And sometimes they get it wrong and lose money.
Yeah, it's been proven that if you have some of these modern digital solutions, you can increase your yields by 20-30%.
Okay. So there you go. So their problem is guesswork, and it's hard. They're risking the farm every year. They don't usually get it right. And the solution is something that increases yields and make more money. There. And where's your market?
So our market is in the small to mid-sized farm, which is defined as less than 350K revenue a year for a farmer.
Okay. That is and do these farmers have money to spend? And is their numbers growing? Because a lot of them are selling.
Yeah. So the USDA does show that this is the only type of farm that has a positive CAGR year over year. There
Oh,
are more of these farms popping up.
okay. All right. Well, there you go. Okay. So you've got a specific problem. It's really hard to plan using pen and paper or spreadsheets. You have a software that helps them make more money, higher yields. And this market is growing and becoming more aware of what they need and hopefully more willing to invest in software.
So can you characterize the benefit to the individual farmer?
Yeah. So if you carry your data over year to year and plug it into these systems, you can use less inputs, so you're spending less money.
This should be one sentence, and you've already blown the opportunity. Yes, 25% increase in revenue, 24% decrease in costs, some kind of margin change. They care about time and money, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so characterize it in terms of how it hurts for me this way. Hurts for me because I'm running out of money on a farm and it's not economic to farm. So now I can get margin because now I'm paying attention to things, right? What is the number? How much am I going to get margin?
So we estimate that you could go from the average is around a 2K net profit to around 30 to 50K
Per
profit.
acre? What is, put that in context. Where am I getting that from?
It's per operation right now.
Well, but operations are all weird sets of sizes. So it would be useful to be able to say on XYZ crop that I can get, X number of percentage growth per acre, or, characterize it in a place where people can bind it to a context that sticks in their head, right? Or to do it overall, I increase margins by 10%, for example. How many of these have you run that then show you that actually happens?
Yes, we have one active pilot right now.
So that would be a place I would focus, is make sure you get yourself 10 or 20 active. And in my mind, I'm a big believer in paid pilots, and try and get, real live numbers for people. And then you have a much tighter know the numbers story that makes the pitch much more credible.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Brian. Good luck. We want to do all we can to help farmers.
Jessica?
Hi, Jessica. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling from Seattle.
Excellent. Isn't it
Yeah.
beautiful today?
It is. It
We'll
is
be
very
outside
nice.
later.
Yes, yes. And I can see the lake from here, so it's even better.
Nice.
All right, let me give it a try. So the problem we are solving is kids don't come with a menu. So parenting should be smooth and enjoyable, but it is right now a lot of trial and error and overwhelming. Here's my main statement. Jane is a working mom. She loves her two kids, which is 6 and 9, but parenting is so overwhelming. She tried her best reading blogs, setting routines, staying patient, but real life doesn't follow a script. So she constantly second guessing herself, and the trial and the error feels endless. Little Blueprint is an AI-powered parenting tool that helps Jane understand what's really going on and gives her right words and strategy tailored to her kids. It helps her respond with confidence, not confusion, and calm, not chaos. And as her kid grow, Little Blueprint grow with them from toddler tantrum to twin drama. It evolves to help Jane navigate every new phases with insights, clarity, and calm.
Okay. Okay, I'll stop you there. So you've got, and I like the story. Depending on how much time you have in your pitch, though, you're going to want a shorter version of that, like a tighter one of, here's this mom. She's very stressed. She doesn't feel confident that she's doing the right things for her kids. And your app helps her feel more confident, helps her respond calmly. I mean, maybe even dig into like what that looks like when somebody's a stressed parent. They yell more, they react to things that they don't mean to because they're not feeling confident. And then the next one is our app helps parents feel that they have that support. They know what to say, they can react calmly, they can practice it. I mean, whatever. So have that short version so that it's very easy for you to explain what you do if you run in. And I wouldn't, so parents, what, kids don't come with a manual? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that's true. That's true. In fact, you know, parents should take a test before they leave the hospital, see if they know what you're doing. But they
Parents
don't.
should
They
take a
send them
test
home.
before they become parents.
Yeah, before you have sex, you need to take this parenting class. Anyway, I could understand what you were doing. I just think work on it to be a little bit more concise, but I do like how you tied it in with you talked about your problem solution and then your product. Like, but when you talk about the product, focus on the benefits. Of the benefits are helps her navigate this, evolve with her child as it grows, that kind of thing. Okay. Keep it really focused on those things before you explain the how.
So I have a thing from David Berman, whose mic isn't working, so I'm going to say it instead. He said, U.S. aesthetic clinics lose 2 billion annually in unrealized injectables revenue due to preventable complications and patient churn, which then I pressed him on, well, how does that translate down to an individual? He says it looks roughly like 300K in lost revenue each year, where you bring in 1 million in revenue per clinic. So a significant churn rate. What do you think about that?
So that's a big problem. I'm just trying to find that chat. Okay. So they have so these clinics are they're losing revenue of 300K a year because of high churn. David, you want to?
You got to talk in the chat, David.
David, if you could reply in the chat, is that kind of the main message? Is that each of these clinics, if you kind of dig into explaining it from one customer's perspective,
I actually don't see David in the list anymore.
Is he gone? Okay.
Oh, there he is, down at the bottom. David Berman on the bottom. David? Yes, there are two problems. Go ahead.
Okay, so the problem is safety issue of complications. Okay, so it's not a revenue and churn issue, it's a safety issue.
And
Okay,
vascular occlusions. All right.
occlusions cause churn. Okay, so people go they have a bad experience and then they don't come back. Okay, so this is the main problem. These bad experiences doing this specific procedure. Okay, so if that's the main problem, is that the problem that you solve? Yes. So I would dig into that. Like instead of saying this whole industry is losing billions, I would just say this procedure is such a pain and it goes wrong more than half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that then, or 60% of the time it goes wrong, and then those patients don't come back. And presumably your solution fixes that procedure so that it's successful and you have happy clients and they keep coming back. You don't have that. You reduce your churn by 50%, guessing.
Which I would expect is not 300K out of 1 million, but it's, like a million and a half more that they get because those people that were leaving once are now coming back for the full treatment. And so you almost double your revenue.
Yeah. So here's where, yeah, being specific like that is that this procedure goes wrong most of the time. People leave, they're unhappy. You're losing this much, you have this high churn. So your solution prevents complications, higher customer satisfaction rate, higher revenue, reduced churn. Those are the kinds of things that investors want to understand in a solution. What do you
I
think?
think
David?
that's good. I think that's about
Love
as
it.
far as we're
Okay.
gonna get. Emma would be a good next person.
Okay, Emma.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm from Northern Ireland.
Where are you calling in from, Emma?
Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland. Okay, fantastic.
So yeah, I wrote down a problem and a solution based on what you said. So hopefully I've learned something. I wrote, there's a local enterprise. They have invested into several AI tools for each of their team divisions, but they are fragmented and disparate solutions. To connect them will cost the enterprise a lot of money and required specialized expertise. Sometimes it's not even possible. Fragmented solutions cause security issues and they are inefficient and cause a lot of tech headaches. Our solution is the OS for AI. It sits between the business and their solutions to allow enterprises to connect and create new solutions all within one unified network, saving money, improving solutions, and making impossible innovation possible.
Okay, so there's a lot of information there. So who's your customer that has these problems?
It's typically large enterprises or organizations. So far, it'd be like we've been talking to construction firms, engineering, airports, that kind of thing. We also do a lot of government contracts with one of our systems, which is like squirrels and stuff.
So it's not like large enterprises that have their own tech department, but big like engineering companies that's not their main business. So
yes, they have they have a tech department, but their main thing is keeping their internal systems up. They're not like a team of, AI experts or engineers or data scientists and stuff. They're looking to embrace innovation to improve their business, but they're not looking to invest in, like an entire new suite of employees essentially. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So maybe they're not large enterprise, maybe they're like medium-sized, but
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I am based in Northern Ireland. Most of
Okay.
those
All
are
right.
large,
All right.
yeah.
So large for Northern Ireland, but if you're talking to investors across Europe and the US, they're
Okay.
probably medium-sized. Okay. So these companies, whether it's like an engineering firm or an airport, tech is not their main business, but they need technology. And what's the big problem that they're frustrated with now?
Well, the problem is that they tend to go for a lot of AI solutions being sold this stream that they don't fulfill because they don't share the same data. So a lot of teams can't cross-reference that data in real time to actually create an action. It's like one of the biggest problems in the industry right now is to make all these things communicate in real time. So that's the
Okay,
bit we
so
come in.
they have fragmented systems.
Yeah.
They have their system, they use an AI solution, but
so
they
they
don't.
tool and get one made, and then they might go to another AI development tool and get that made, and they might be using ChatGPT, which is just an AI plugin tool, and someone else might be using a different division of something. It's a way to collaborate all those and feed all that data in and pretty much optimize along the pipeline to say, well, you don't actually need that AI tool because you can cross-reference that data, and
Yeah, wait, you have to slow down.
Yeah.
You're losing me. Okay. So I'm just trying to hone in on the problem you solve. The systems are fragmented. They bring in another tool and it doesn't talk to what they have and the data doesn't connect.
Yeah, so currently they just have different tools, so they don't
They have
connect.
different tools. They're not talking to each other.
Yeah, they don't.
And
They
they're
don't
not
connect.
connected to their data.
Yeah, so you get our tool and all your stuff can
Wait.
connect.
Problem. Problem is they're using tools that aren't talking to each other and they're not connected to the data. Is that the problem?
Well, the problem is they're losing money and they don't have the expertise to fix it. Yeah.
Okay. They're trying all these AI tools that are costing them a lot of money and they don't. Okay. And they're not.
So how much money?
It depends on what system you're using.
Pick someone. I went to XYZ company. We put our thing
Okay,
in.
okay. The government, if you look at the squirrel contract, they lose 9 million a year trying to work on squirrel conservation methods. Ours would come in as a solution to that. And yes, it might not save them the full 9 million, but you're talking about at least a 60%, lack of less staff and less security concerns and less stuff that they actually require.
Okay,
So,
so all
so-
these tools that they're trying are costing them a lot of money, but they're not working because they're not integrated.
mhm.
So how does your solution save them money and get things talking to each other?
Well, it's an OS, so everything connects through
No,
one.
not
and
the
it-
features. Tell me
Yeah.
the outcomes for the customer.
Well, they use it and everything connects, so it's more efficient, it's more performant, it's more accurate, it's more reliable. Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much. It's
So those
really
are
the
the
money
benefits.
thing.
Yeah, so those are the key outcomes. You help them actually, now you're using the money that they put into it and it works and you're getting rid of things you don't use. So
Yeah,
yes,
and
so focus on those benefits in your solution, the outcomes for your customer. Yeah, good luck. Thank you, Emma.
thank you.
Nick looks
Nick,
next.
thank you for being patient. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in also from Seattle. I'm over
Oh,
on
nice.
the Lake Washington Slough, and it's just gorgeous up here too. We have the Northwest is the place to be right now.
Yes.
Okay, so property managers and homeowners in the US face water costs that are rising 3 times faster than inflation, and 10% of homes have leaks that waste 90 gallons or more of water per day. Drip Meter's smart water meter clamps onto pipes with no plumber required, and our apps identify leaks and overconsumption in real time, helping reduce usage and save money. We target property managers and homeowners with vacation homes in states that highly value water, just California, Triangle, specific places like that.
Okay. So your market is in places like California where water's expensive and scarce. So it's homeowners or you started off, what was the problem statement?
It's property managers and homeowners in the US.
Property managers and homeowners. And they have leaks and then water. So they're wasting water due to leaks.
Yep, and it's costing them
Okay.
money. And then I left out the insurance side of stuff, just trying to keep it more focused.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I get it. I mean, there is a little bit, can you do that? Be a bit more concise and then pause in between so that we really can take it in and visualize. So say
Sure.
that first sentence again.
So property managers in the US face water costs that are rising 3 times faster than inflation.
Okay. But is that the problem you solve?
No.
No. Okay. What problem do you solve?
10% of homes have leaks that waste 90 gallons or more of water per day.
Okay. And how
So
much does
people are unaware of the money they're losing through leaks, and this gives them a way to figure it out.
Yes.
okay.
So it may be the case that you have a hidden vampire on your monthly costs that you're unaware of. So take my device and plug it in and see if you're losing money on your water bill.
Yeah, so start with the problem you solve, not the problem that's the background problem of, oh my goodness, water prices are going up. But you can't fix that part. You only can fix the leaks. So focus on that. This many people have leaks of this much, and it could raise their water bill by 10 or 20% or whatever or more. That's the kind of thing that you solve.
Is your home older than 10 years? You have a 80% chance that you have a leak that's costing you money. Blah, blah, blah. If you
Yeah.
could get that number, that'd be useful, right?
Yeah. Or so if I could say it as like 1 in 10, are you the 1 in 10 homeowners that's unaware that you're losing, whatever,
So,
90
so the thing that I was trying to shift you to is that there's a subpopulation that probably has a lot more probability of having a leak. And so if your home is older than a certain amount, or if you're in a certain kind of house, then the probability is not 10%, but it's like 40% or 50% that you've got a problem, right? Did they install under floor heating with copper pipes and your house is older than 10 years old? Probability is 80% that you're going to have a leak in the next 4 years. That would be a nice market to focus in
Yeah.
on it. And that gives you a very urgent need instead of the Well, 1 out of 10, that's probably not me.
Well, also in keeping track, you're talking to investors, not customers. But investors want to know who's that market. So when you say 10% of homes, who are you targeting first that's likely, as John said, to be in that 10%? Is it people's cabins or up in the mountains, or is it their you know, their old house in the old down in inner cities? I mean, that's the kind of thing. If we want to know who you're targeting and what their problem is.
And then
Yeah.
that allows you to demonstrate expertise in your submarket, and then allows you to show a sophisticated go-to-market strategy, which demonstrates competence. So you're trying to demonstrate competence and you're trying to demonstrate vision, right? Those are the two core things at the beginning of the pitch. So I make the pitch, I demonstrate I know my numbers, I understand that I understand my submarkets, I have traction, and I have a vision about how that gets me to big enough that everybody's going to win in terms of the financials.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Are there other folks with thoughts?
Anybody have questions? We've done a lot of like listening and brainstorming here. Does anybody have questions about their pitch or about how to make something more focused on what investors want?
Well, yes, go ahead, Talio.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Dana. One thing I'm struggling and wondering about is you're both giving really great advice on how to specify who your first customers are and talk about that market size. How do you demonstrate that you know that market size and are targeting that while simultaneously showing larger potential down the road where that may be a little bit more hand wavy?
Well, you can do this in there's two opportunities in your pitch to demonstrate that. The first would be in market opportunity, where you say our beachhead market is this, and you can explain we're targeting, this size of enterprise customer in the US or in whatever country, and there's 5,000 of them, which gives you a market size of that. And then the next market would be this, and the next market, and each one is bigger. The others is in your go-to-market, where you're talking about your go-to-market, how you're targeting that first customer. You could also then say, we're in the next pipeline of customer is this. So you can get that, but you don't want to start with that because you don't want to confuse. You want to show that you really know intimately the problem of your customer and how you're going to solve that. And then you can show how that can grow by targeting bigger markets. Anything to add, John?
I think, there's the story of this Utah company, and I keep forgetting their name. It's one of those made up words that you have to remember it by itself. But they kept having submarkets. They had, I'm going after this market, and then I'm going after that market, and they stair stepped their way up like 8 different markets. And each time they went for investors, the investors could not see the vision about what they were doing overall. And over 8 to 10 years, they made themselves like a $4 billion company, but they did a pretty bad job of getting outside funding. And so they kept, strategically finding a submarket was just big enough to take the next step. And then they got big enough, and then they built a little fat, and then they went after that one. And each time they didn't get funding, and each time they succeeded at getting the next market through just focus. And the end result is that he owned something like the founder owned 80% of the company when they got acquired for $4 billion. So it's important to be able to tell the vision about where that goes. And sometimes the balls don't line up in a row neatly enough for the investors to get it in their head about what's going on. And so that's why paying attention to being cash flow positive in each of those steps matters. And then utilizing your outside money to transform your business and productivity so that you get to a new market. And that go to market strategy is the thing that you want to hint at in your pitches, whether it's a 1 minute, 3 minute, or 5 minute, or 10-minute pitch. You want to hint at, I understand my submarkets well, and I'm going to walk through that, right? And you don't have to tell the details of every submarket. You just have to demonstrate, I have competence and traction in this one, and that naturally leads to this other one that's big, right? And you may have to tell some of the steps to get there, but you don't have to be complete, right? Our goal in a pitch is not to be complete, it's to be compelling. You just have to demonstrate competence in understanding the submarkets. And traction represents market awareness and demand. So you want to structure like your pilots as things that demonstrate demand, which is why again I opt to tell people to try to do paid pilots, try to do early customer engagement where there's money coming in, even if it's for one-time engineering costs for customers to build them a custom solution. That binds you to an understanding of the submarket, and you can tell that story.
Thank you. I appreciate both of your feedback.
You're welcome. There's a question in the chat that Brian asked about, do key features of your product belong on the solution slide or in the slide deck at all? And my opinion is that features are way on the bottom of the list. You start with solution, as in these are your customer outcomes. When you have a product section, when you explain your product, you explain the benefits to your customers. If your features are so unique that you need to squeeze them in somewhere, you stick them under a benefit, right? The benefit is they save money, and then you can say, by our use of blah, blah, blah. Or, and sometimes if you have like at least 5 minutes, maybe 10, probably 10 minutes, you can have two product slides where one is more focused on the feature, on the benefits, and the second one you can call how it works, where it's still from the perspective of a customer of what that experience is like, but you can include a little bit of how it works and what that feature is. But don't overdo it on features, because investors actually don't care about features. They really care about outcomes and is there a market for this? So I've always challenged people, don't mention features for at least 5 minutes. If you can talk about your problem and solution and product benefits and market opportunity and business model and go to market and your traction and your team, all of that is much more important than the features of your product. Then you can have a little time to maybe mention it after that. Does anybody have any question? Anyone else have questions?
One of the things that I plan to do is to schedule a pitch deconstruction workshop where we'll have people do 1-minute pitches and then some people do 3-minute pitches, and we'll sort of rip them apart. So it's worth, it's sort of the next level of engagement beyond this. But again, people tell the product story 80% of the time, and that's not what you're selling to the investor. You're selling the company to the investor. And so you need to practice having the story for the investment, not the story for the client. And you need to practice that set of words in your head a lot. So we'll try and give you some opportunities to do that. And I would encourage you to do it with lots of people who do not know you. Go have a coffee with someone and give them the little 1-minute pitch and see if it resonates and get feedback and practice every day, just a little bit every day, so that you're making some kind of, and if you can't do it with people, at least do it with the Yodlee thing that Dana was talking about.
Yeah, the Udly app is great for practicing. You can do it at, 11 o'clock at night instead of finding somebody to listen to you. Just practice it on Udly and get feedback.
Cool. Any other thoughts or questions from anyone? If you have issues with your startup or issues with getting ready to be investable, I am currently scheduling workshops, and so you should see them showing up on our various meetup groups. Um, Feel free to send me suggestions, and I will try and find speakers that match those. Yes, Nick.
I had a question about talking about the things that are missing, right? So if I'm doing it as a solo founder, I'm more technical. I'm trying to do a lot more of like the sales and pre-sales. But knowing that that's a need, how is that something to is that something to put into a deck to even talk to investors about? Is that the kind of thing that's like, nah, don't even talk to investors until you've crossed that bridge?
Well, there's a bunch of simple things you can be doing now as a solo founder, which put anchors in the ground, which I don't understand why you would not want to do that to sort of validate that it's worth spending your life energy on this crazy thing you're doing. And so the customer development experiments are one example of that, finding a group of people that really badly need a solution and they're screaming about it in some corner somewhere and doing that experiment and nailing it down. Now, there are like 16 core things that we as investors are trying to extract from your 1 minute pitch, right? Everything that is in a lean canvas, we want to have that in our head as we hear your story. We're trying to pull those pieces out. We're also trying to pull out things about your go to market, things about your team, things about your traction, things about your market size that all should be obvious from any one of your pitches at enough level that we're curious. Might even be, like 5 of those things all scrunched into one sentence. And I posted an example of that in the chat, where what we're trying to do is to categorize where you're at, right? As a business, we're trying to, are you pre-revenue or post-revenue? Are you complete team or not complete team? Do you have customer interest or not? Just, are you early pre-seed? Are you like rocking and rolling with 25% week over week growth? Just quickly put it in a box. So as a solo founder with 1,000 customers with 10% week over week growth, hey, I can ignore the fact that you don't have a marketing person. But as a single founder who's technical, who hasn't got anybody who's interested customer, then there's like a whole 25% of the business that makes it completely fantasy for us. So spend a little bit of energy and put a stake in that box enough to demonstrate that there's a thing there, right? In the same way, validating that you have something interesting by having a co-founder that's committed with you is a high signal stake in the ground, right? And so where you can nail those things down and create stability in the story, which also translates to stability in the business foundation, that's a win. I see Edmund raising his hand.
Yeah, the question is, you mentioned, business have problems so is there like way to find like a list or a way to find what problems are out there and what is in demand?
I think the real answer is you have to listen carefully to people where they are complaining. So if you want to go find plumbers who are complaining about plumber problems, you have to go find a room full of plumbers or accountants or whatever and find those people and listen to them about what's the top 3 questions, right, for them. So that's what a customer discovery experiment is about. Finding a place where that subgroup of people has a relatively high concentration and then giving them the opportunity of telling you what's giving them trouble today.
And keep in mind, Edmund, investors are looking for people with that industry experience, that expertise. So wherever you come from, if you know that industry, but you don't know you're not clear on what problems people will pay to solve, this is where you need to talk to people that you know, so that you develop that expertise in what people want solved.
Right.
So-
So practical, would that be like going to Google or going to where do I go?
No, that would be going to work, like working in an industry that you know, and then talking to people in it, like meeting people or going to trade shows or inviting people on Zoom calls or coffee, so that you find out what people are struggling with in an industry that you understand.
So one example of an extreme version of that is there was a software guy that wanted to understand restaurants. And in order to understand restaurants, he became a dishwasher and worked his way up inside a restaurant and watched the dynamics of the inside of the restaurant for a year as a part of his trying to build an understanding of how the restaurant did what it did, right? And he used that experience as a way of finding other restaurants and talking to them and then understanding how the common problems were in their way so they could find the little specific problems that caused big trouble. So, you know, for a software guy, taking contracts for people who have specific problems in a specific industry is a straightforward way to do that, right? And you know, the stupid approach to that is Upwork has lots of problems that people are posting. I need somebody to solve this problem, for example. Other questions or thoughts from anyone? Sounds like we're getting to the end of
Yep.
people's needs. Thank you everyone for coming and being part of this. I did just post another workshop that we've got in a couple of weeks. Please do check out the meetup groups as they get new workshops over the summer. And hopefully we can help you make progress on your programs. Thank you so much, Dana. Really appreciate you working on this. Are there any things in the future for you in terms of events that you might run into people in the Seattle area?
Yes, I am doing an event in person in Bellevue on Saturday the 19th, and I'll be talking about beyond the slides, delivering an engaging pitch. So where I talked about having that great narrative then makes it easier for you to connect with investors. This is when you're doing that delivery, like having those communication skills to connect. And that is in person on July 19th. If you're in the area, if you're on my mailing list and follow me on LinkedIn, watch for that.
Great. Thanks so much. Again, we will put this on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe there. And if you find the three little dots, you can save the chat, and I'll wait a couple of minutes so that people can do that, saving the chat. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Thanks for participating.